I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. The polished mahogany dining table stretched between us like a battlefield one, where I was always on the losing side. Victoria, my mother, sat at the head of the table, her expression dripping with disdain. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped rhythmically on her wineglass, her smirk barely concealed. "Ethan, I can't believe you still haven't figured it out," she sneered, her voice cutting through the chatter of distant relatives and business partners. "Maddie is the only one who has ever made me proud." Maddie, sitting beside her, basked in the attention. She leaned back in her chair, her smile dripping with arrogance. "Mom, you're too kind," she said sweetly, but her eyes flickered with triumph as she shot me a sideways glance. I kept my expression neutral, but my blood boiled. This wasn't new. It had been this way my entire life. Maddie, the golden child, and me, the invisible disappointment. But tonight felt different. There was a finality in Victoria's words, as if she was done pretending I was even worth acknowledging. Around the table, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged awkward glances, while others, like Liam, my so-called rival, watched with cold amusement. I forced myself to remain composed. They wouldn't see me break. Not tonight. "Ethan," Victoria continued, her tone dripping with condescension, "if only you had followed Maddie's example. She's built a career that reflects our family's prestige. And you?" She tilted her head, mock pity in her eyes. "Scraping by with your little side projects." I swallowed hard, my nails digging into my palms under the table. They didn't know. None of them did, and that was about to change. My father, Daniel, sat beside Victoria, his gaze downcast, as always. He rarely spoke up, especially when it came to defending me. I could tell he hated these moments, but he had long since learned that standing up to Victoria was a losing battle. But not Grandma Eleanor. I felt her eyes on me. Sitting quietly at the other end of the table, her presence was often overlooked, but not by me. Her gaze was steady, her expression unreadable, but I could sense the storm brewing beneath. "Victoria," Grandma's voice finally broke the tense silence, calm yet commanding. "Enough." The room fell quiet. Victoria's smirk faltered, but she quickly masked it with faux amusement. "Mother, please," she said, laughing lightly. "There's no need to." "No." Grandma Eleanor's voice was firmer now, her eyes narrowing as she looked directly at Victoria. "It's time they knew the truth." My heart pounded. What truth? Victoria's eyes flickered with unease for the first time that night. Maddie sat up straighter, her confidence dimming slightly. "Ethan," Grandma said softly, her gaze shifting to me. "It's time." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had waited for this moment, but I never imagined it would happen like this. The weight of the room's attention settled on me, and for the first time, I felt something stir deep inside, something that had been buried under years of rejection. Power. I met Grandma's eyes, a silent understanding passing between us. This was it. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. The silence that followed Grandma Eleanor's words was heavier than the crystal chandelier hanging above the dining table. Every pair of eyes at the table was now fixed on her, and for once, even Victoria was at a loss for words. "What truth, Mother?" Victoria's voice was tight, the forced smile on her face cracking slightly. Grandma Eleanor didn't respond immediately. Instead, she placed her hands gently on the table, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface as if steadying herself. But when she finally spoke, her words cut through the air with quiet precision. "Ethan," she said, softly, her gaze locking onto mine. "Tell them." My throat went dry. I had waited years for this moment, but now that it was here, the weight of it threatened to crush me. I glanced at Victoria, whose expression had shifted from arrogance to thinly veiled concern. Maddie, for once, wasn't smirking. Her eyes darted between me and Grandma, her confidence starting to waver. I took a steady breath, feeling the tension coil tighter with each passing second. "I built my own company," I said, my voice steady but firm. "From the ground up, no handouts, no family connections, just me." Murmurs spread through the guests like wildfire. I caught glimpses of shocked expressions, raised eyebrows, and whispered conversations. Victoria scoffed, but I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Please," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "What could you possibly have built that's worth mentioning?" I didn't answer her. "Not yet." "Ethan's company," Grandma's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs, "has outperformed yours, Victoria." The air was sucked out of the room. Victoria's smile froze on her lips. "What?" My heart pounded as I watched the color drain from her face. For years, she had ignored me, dismissed everything I did as insignificant. And now, the truth was staring her in the face. "I invested in Ethan's company," Grandma Eleanor continued, her tone unwavering. "And unlike your enterprise, Victoria, his business has flourished." Maddie's eyes widened, her confidence cracking as her grip on her fork tightened. "That's impossible," she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's not," I replied, my tone calmer than I expected. "While you and Mom were too busy propping each other up and laughing at me, I was building something real, something that doesn't rely on family favors or empty praise." Victoria's eyes narrowed, but I could see the panic beginning to seep through her composure. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising slightly. "Eleanor, you're mistaken." "There's no way." "I'm not mistaken," Grandma interrupted, her gaze never leaving Victoria, and I made sure of it. She reached into her bag, pulling out a sleek folder and placing it on the table. The sound of it landing on the polished wood echoed through the room like a gavel. "Legal documents," Grandma said, her voice cool and composed. "Showing Ethan's company acquiring controlling shares in your business, Victoria." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I watched as Victoria's face paled, her eyes scanning the documents with growing desperation. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, her breath quickening. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Maddie leaned over, snatching the documents from her mother's hands. Her eyes darted across the pages, and I saw her jaw clench tighter with every word she read. "This can't be happening," Maddie muttered, her voice strained. But it was. "It's happening," I said quietly, my gaze steady. "I've spent the last 3 years preparing for this moment, watching, studying. I saw the cracks forming in your empire long before you did, and now, it's mine." Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. The woman who had always controlled every situation now found herself powerless, her carefully constructed world crumbling before her eyes. "You underestimated me," I continued, my voice carrying across the stunned silence. "All those years you mocked me, dismissed me. You never once thought I was capable of doing this." I leaned back in my chair, a quiet satisfaction settling in my chest as I watched Victoria and Maddie squirm. And for the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, the weight of the moment pressed down on the room like a thundercloud ready to burst. Victoria's hands shook as she flipped through the documents again, her expression frozen in disbelief. Maddie leaned closer, her face flushed with panic as she skimmed the legal jargon that sealed their fate. This isn't possible," Victoria murmured, but her voice lacked its usual venom. "For the first time in my life," she sounded, uncertain. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and clasped my hands together. I could feel the pulse of victory thrumming through my veins, but I kept my expression composed. "Oh, it's very possible," I said, my tone calm but firm. "In fact, it's already done." I watched as Victoria's mask of confidence cracked further. For years, she had lorded over me, treating me like a failure while parading Maddie as her golden child. But now, the balance had shifted. The queen had just been dethroned, and she didn't even know how to process it. Maddie's eyes were glued to the papers, her lips moving silently as she read through the fine print. When she finally spoke, her voice was a strained whisper. "Grandma, you backed him?" Her disbelief was palpable, as if the very idea was too absurd to comprehend. "Yes, I did," Grandma Eleanor replied smoothly, her tone carrying the authority of someone who had seen enough of life to know when to place her bets. "I saw what Ethan was capable of. I watched him work tirelessly, building something from nothing while you and your mother sat comfortably, basking in the glow of a legacy you didn't earn. Maddie's jaw clenched. But why? Because, Grandma said, her gaze steady and unyielding. Ethan deserved a chance, and he proved himself. Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she fixed her glare on Grandma. You had no right, she hissed, but her voice wavered. Grandma didn't flinch. I had every right, Victoria. You were too blinded by your arrogance to see what was happening right in front of you. Ethan built something real, something that didn't rely on our family name to succeed. Victoria's face reddened, but before she could lash out, I spoke again, my voice cutting through the rising tension. For the last 3 years, I began, my tone measured but laced with quiet intensity. I've been watching, studying. I saw the cracks forming in your business long before you did, Mother. Her eyes flashed with fury, but I didn't give her a chance to interrupt. You over-relied on Maddie, I continued, my gaze shifting to my sister, whose face was a mask of barely contained anger. You gave her control of projects she had no idea how to handle. And when things started falling apart, you threw money at the problems, hoping they would go away. Maddie's nostrils flared. You don't know anything about running a business, she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. I arched an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. Don't I? I leaned back slightly, my confidence growing with each passing second. Then how is it that my insignificant little company managed to surpass yours? Maddie's mouth clamped shut. I did my homework, I continued, my tone unwavering. I learned from your mistakes. While you were too busy climbing the social ladder and playing the perfect daughter, I was studying market trends, analyzing weaknesses, and identifying opportunities. And when I saw that your empire was crumbling, I let the sentence hang for a moment, savoring the weight of my words. I was ready. Victoria's jaw tightened, but I could see the cracks forming in her composure. She was losing control, and she knew it. You played a dangerous game, Mother, I said softly, leaning forward just enough for her to feel the shift in power. And you lost. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the occasional murmurs of the guests who were now witnessing the downfall of the once untouchable Victoria Carter. Liam, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, finally spoke, his tone laced with disbelief. So, you've been planning this all along? I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. I didn't plan for this, I said honestly, but I knew an opportunity when I saw one. Victoria's eyes darted between me and the documents on the table, her mind racing to find a way out. But there was none. And here's the best part, I said, my voice dropping just enough to make the room lean in. As of tomorrow, the board has approved the transfer of all executive authority to me. Victoria's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. You? What? I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that I had been holding back for years. You're out, I said simply. Both of you. Maddie shot up from her chair, her face flushed with rage. You can't do this, she spat. This is our company. Not anymore, I replied coolly. Check the documents. The controlling shares are now mine. Her eyes darted back to the papers, and as the truth sank in, her confidence shattered. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper now. Ethan, you don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, standing up slowly. I'm taking back what should have been mine all along. I turned my gaze toward the board members, most of whom looked either impressed or relieved. They had seen the decline under Victoria's leadership, and now they were witnessing the rise of someone who was ready to lead with purpose. I'm not here to destroy what's left, I said, my voice carrying across the room. I'm here to rebuild, to take this company to heights you never imagined. A ripple of approval spread through the room. Victoria and Maddie sat frozen, their world collapsing around them. This isn't over, Maddie whispered, but her voice trembled. I tilted my head, meeting her gaze with a calm, unwavering stare. Oh, Maddie, I said softly, it's over. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Victoria was still staring at the documents on the table, her fingers trembling as they gripped the edges of the papers. Maddie sat beside her, her usual air of superiority shattered beyond repair. I watched as the realization of their defeat settled over them like a suffocating weight. "This can't be happening," Maddie whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes flickered to Victoria, searching for reassurance that wasn't there. But Victoria had nothing left to give. Her face, usually so composed and full of arrogance, was now pale and drained of confidence. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to speak, but no words came out. "It's happening," I said softly, my voice echoing in the deafening silence. I stood up, the legs of my chair scraping against the polished floor, and slowly buttoned my suit jacket. I wanted to savor this moment, the moment where the tables had finally turned. "You underestimated me," I continued, my eyes locking onto Victoria's. "For years, you made me feel like I was nothing, a disappointment, an embarrassment to this family." I stepped closer, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. "But while you were busy worshiping Maddie's so-called achievements, I was building something real. And now," I gestured to the documents, "I own everything." Victoria's gaze finally lifted to meet mine. There was no more fire in her eyes, just desperation. "Ethan," her voice was softer now, almost pleading, "this is our legacy, our family's empire. You can't just—" I tilted my head, my expression cool and unwavering. "Can't what, Mother? Protect what's left of this company from being dragged into the ground?" Her jaw clenched, but she had no argument left to make. "Let me make something clear," I said, my tone lowering as I leaned in slightly. "I didn't take over this company to destroy it. I took over to fix what you broke. You and Maddie turned this empire into a vanity project, a playground where you could flaunt power without consequence. But that ends today." Maddie's head snapped up, her face flushed with anger. "You think you're better than us?" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "Just because Grandma handed you a golden ticket doesn't mean you can run this company." I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "You're right, Maddie," I said, my voice dripping with calm control. "It wasn't a golden ticket. It was an opportunity, one that I worked damn hard to earn." Maddie's nostrils flared. "This isn't over." I arched an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. "Oh, Maddie," I said softly, "it's over." I straightened, turning my gaze toward the board members seated along the table. Most of them had remained silent during the chaos, but their expressions spoke volumes. Some looked relieved, while others, particularly those who had aligned themselves too closely with Victoria, looked uneasy. "Effective immediately," I announced. "Victoria and Maddie are relieved of all executive duties. They will no longer have any authority within this company." A murmur of agreement rippled through the board. Victoria's eyes widened. "Ethan, no. You don't have to." "I do," I cut her off, my voice firm but not unkind. "This company deserves leadership that puts its future first, not personal gain." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. "As for you, Maddie," I turned to my sister, whose smug confidence had evaporated completely. "You were given every advantage, every opportunity, and yet you still managed to run every project you touched into the ground." "That's not true," Maddie snapped, but her voice wavered. "Really?" I arched an eyebrow, crossing my arms. "Tell me, Maddie, how many failed projects did Mother have to cover up for you? How many deals fell apart because you couldn't handle the pressure?" Her face reddened, her jaw clenching so tight I thought her teeth might crack. "I'm done cleaning up your messes," I said coldly. "If you're looking for someone to bail you out this time, it won't be me." Maddie's eyes flashed with fury, but she had nothing left to say. I turned my attention back to the board, my tone shifting to one of authority and confidence. "The transition plan is already in place. I'll be meeting with the executive team first thing tomorrow morning to discuss our new direction." Liam, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke. "And what direction would that be, Ethan?" I met his gaze, my expression unreadable, one that focuses on innovation, not ego. "Progress, not personal gain." Liam nodded slowly, his expression neutral but thoughtful. "As for the rest of you," I addressed the board, my tone firm, "you're welcome to stay and be part of this new chapter. But if anyone here doubts my ability to lead, feel free to walk away. I won't stop you." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. "I thought so," I murmured, a satisfied smirk tugging at my lips. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. "Ethan, please." I looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. But it was too late. "You had your chance," I said quietly, the weight of years of neglect and humiliation pressing down on those words. "And you threw it away." A heavy silence settled over the room. Victoria's shoulders slumped, and Maddie's fists clenched at her sides, but neither of them spoke. "Security," I called out, my voice echoing through the vast dining room. Within moments, 2 uniformed guards appeared at the doorway. "Escort them out," I said simply. Maddie shot up from her seat, her face flushed with rage. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I already have," I replied, my tone devoid of emotion. Victoria stood slowly, her movements stiff, as if the weight of her defeat had physically drained her. She didn't look at me as she turned toward the exit, her head held high but her spirit clearly broken. Maddie, on the other hand, wasn't ready to go quietly. "You'll regret this," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. I met her gaze, my expression calm. "No, Maddie," I said softly, "I won't." As they were escorted out, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Years of being dismissed, ridiculed, and ignored had led to this moment, and now it was done. I turned back to the table, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the remaining guests. "This," I said, my voice steady and unwavering, "is just the beginning." A ripple of murmurs spread across the room as I straightened my jacket and turned toward the exit. And as I walked out, leaving the ghosts of my past behind, I knew I was finally free. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped out of the mansion, the weight of the evening lifting off my shoulders, the distant hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses from inside faded as I walked down the marble steps, each step feeling lighter than the last. For the first time in years, I felt free. The moonlight bathed the driveway in a soft glow as I stood there, taking it all in. The echoes of my past, the mockery, the ridicule, the years of being cast aside, were now nothing more than distant memories. I had done it. I had taken back what was mine and carved out a future where I was no longer in the shadow of my family's expectations. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw a message from Blake. "Blake, it's all over the news. They're calling it the biggest corporate shakeup of the decade. You good?" I smirked, the corners of my lips tugging upward. "Me, better than ever." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and exhaled slowly. The headlines would be relentless by morning. Every business channel, every financial publication, hell, even the tabloids would be buzzing about how the disgraced son had taken down the family empire. But I didn't care. This wasn't about headlines. This was about redemption. As I stood there, soaking in the quiet of the night, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "Ethan," came Grandma Eleanor's voice, soft but steady. I turned to face her, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to let my guard down. "Grandma," I said quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. She stepped closer, her eyes filled with warmth and pride. "You did it," she said softly, her voice laced with emotion. I nodded, but the weight of the moment hit me harder than I expected. "I couldn't have done it without you." Grandma Eleanor reached out, her hand gently cupping my cheek. "No, Ethan," she said firmly. "You did this. I just gave you the chance. But you built this. You fought for it." My throat tightened, and I blinked back the unexpected sting of tears. I paused, struggling to find the right words. I spent so many years feeling invisible, like I didn't matter. And now, Grandma's eyes softened, "And now they see you for who you really are." I swallowed hard, nodding. "But Ethan," she continued, her voice dropping to a gentle whisper, "you don't have to prove anything to them anymore. You've already won." Her words hit me like a freight train. She was right. For so long, I had been chasing validation, I had wanted Victoria and Maddie to see me as more than just a failure. But standing here, with everything I had accomplished, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I know, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. A comfortable silence settled between us, the cool breeze rustling the leaves in the distance. What's next for you, Ethan? Grandma asked softly, her eyes filled with curiosity. I took a deep breath, my mind already racing with possibilities. I'm not just going to fix the company, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to reshape it, build something that actually matters. Grandma's lips curved into a knowing smile. And you'll do it. I looked back toward the mansion, where the remnants of the life I had left behind lingered like ghosts. Victoria and Maddie were gone, but their influence had left scars that would take time to heal. I don't want this company to be about power games and greed anymore, I said, more to myself than to Grandma. I want to create something that makes a difference, something that actually helps people. Grandma nodded, her expression thoughtful. Then lead with purpose, Ethan, not with vengeance. Her words settled deep in my chest, a reminder that while revenge had brought me this far, it couldn't guide me forward. Thank you, Grandma, I said softly, my voice filled with gratitude. She squeezed my hand gently. I'm so proud of you, Ethan, and your grandfather would be too. A lump formed in my throat at the mention of my grandfather. He had always believed in me, even when no one else did. I hope so, I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. Grandma gave my hand one last squeeze before stepping back. Go, she said softly. This is your time now. The morning after. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the headlines had already spread like wildfire. Corporate empire, shaken as Sun takes over in unprecedented power shift. Victoria Carter and Maddie Carter, stripped of authority as Ethan Carter, takes the helm. Family drama unfolds as the disgraced Sun rises to power. I scrolled through the articles, barely registering the words. The world was watching, but I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for me. My phone buzzed again this time. A call. Morning, Blake, I greeted as I answered. Dude, Blake's voice came through, laced with excitement. You seeing this? You're everywhere. Yeah, I chuckled, leaning back in my chair. It's a little surreal. Surreal? Blake laughed. Try legendary. I smiled, but my mind was already moving ahead. I don't have time to soak it in, I said, my tone shifting to one of focus. There's a lot of work to do. Blake was silent for a moment. You're really doing this, huh? Yeah, I said softly, my resolve hardening. I'm not just taking over, Blake. I'm going to change everything. And Victoria and Maddie? He asked cautiously. I exhaled slowly. They're done, I said simply. They won't be coming back from this. A beat of silence passed. And you? I smiled, the weight of the past finally lifting. I'm just getting started. 6 months later, the boardroom looked different now. Lighter, freer. The tension and toxicity that had once suffocated this space were gone. I stood at the head of the table, addressing a room full of people who had once doubted me. But now, they believed. We've made incredible progress over the last 6 months, I said, my gaze sweeping across the room. But this is just the beginning. Our goal isn't just to be profitable, it's to be impactful, to create something that lasts. Nods of agreement followed, and that's exactly what we're going to do. As I finished speaking, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't just about taking control anymore. It was about building something meaningful, something I could be proud of. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Story 2. I'm Rachel, 27, and I've been married to Ethan, 30, for 3 years now. From the moment I stepped into his life, it was obvious that his family didn't like me. His mom, Margaret, made that very clear in her passive-aggressive way. And his siblings Claire and Chloe, 25, and Jake, 23, weren't much better. I never figured out why, but I was determined to fix it. I wanted Ethan to have a good relationship with his family, and I didn't want to be the reason he drifted apart from them. Ethan warned me early on. He told me that no matter how much effort I put in, they weren't going to change. But I'm stubborn. I thought I could win them over if I showed them how much I cared. That's when I had the bright idea to throw Margaret a surprise party for her 50th birthday. I figured it was a big milestone, and if I pulled off something she'd love, maybe just maybe she'd start to warm up to me. Ethan wasn't thrilled about the idea. He told me I was wasting my time, but I brushed it off. I was determined. I went all out. I booked a fancy restaurant where Margaret and her late husband used to go on date nights. I coordinated with the venue to get all her favorite dishes, and even made sure the decor was exactly how she liked it, minimal and elegant. I invited her closest friends and a few family members, all with Ethan's help. Here's the kicker, her own kids, they didn't lift a finger. I tried involving Claire, Chloe, and Jake in the planning, but they brushed me off. If you want to do it, go ahead, they said. I should have taken that as a sign, but I was too focused on making this party perfect. The calm before the storm, the night before the big day, Ethan and I went to Margaret's house to give her a heads up. I was excited, thinking she'd be touched that I went through all this trouble for her. We walked in, and as usual, Claire, Chloe, and Jake were already there. They barely acknowledged me, but I was used to that. After some small talk, I finally told Margaret about the party. I expected her to be surprised, maybe even a little emotional. Instead, she looked annoyed. She forced a smile and said, "Oh, thank you, Ethan," totally ignoring me. Ethan corrected her immediately, telling her I planned everything. Her face dropped, and I swear the temperature in that room dropped with it. "That's sweet of you, Rachel," she said, but her tone was dripping with fake politeness. Then she hit me with it. "I appreciate the effort," she started, "but I've decided I want my 50th to be just family. I'd like to keep it intimate." I blinked, not fully understanding what she was saying. "But I invited your closest friends. I made sure everything was perfect for you," I said, my voice trailing off. She gave me a sugary smile that made my skin crawl. "I'm sure it's lovely, dear, but I don't consider you family." Boom. There it was, the breaking point. Ethan looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. I, on the other hand, felt a wave of heat rush through me. Claire and Chloe were smirking, barely holding back their laughter. Jake looked like he was enjoying the show. I stood up. "You can go to hell," I said calmly, which wiped the smug looks right off their faces. "If you show up tomorrow, I'll have security escort you out." Margaret's jaw dropped. "You're being unreasonable," she gasped. "Unreasonable?" I laughed. "No, Margaret. Unreasonable is treating someone who's bent over backwards for you like garbage. I'm done." Ethan and I left, and on the drive home, I was fuming. I tried to cancel the reservation, but it was too late. Everything was paid for, and I couldn't get a refund. Ethan was quiet the whole way, but when we got home, he simply said, "You did the right thing." Then he went out for a smoke, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wasn't going to let all that money and effort go to waste. So I called my friends and invited them instead. Ethan invited a few of his friends, and we turned what was supposed to be Margaret's birthday party into a celebration for us. We had an amazing time. I posted pictures afterward, and that's when the real drama started. The fallout begins. Claire texted me the next morning. "You ruined Mom's birthday," she wrote. "That was incredibly selfish of you. You knew how much that place meant to her." I didn't even respond. I was past caring. When I told Ethan about it, he just shook his head. "Don't apologize," he said firmly. In fact, his jaw clenched. I've had enough. I didn't expect what came next. Ethan decided it was time to cut them off. Completely. "They rely on me for everything," he said quietly. "They're not going to like this." And he was right. Uncovering the truth, Ethan's family had been living off him for years. His father passed away when he was 21, and Margaret never worked a day in her life. Ethan stepped up, took on the responsibility of providing for his family, and built his own company from the ground up. But instead of appreciating his sacrifices, they treated him like a bank account with legs. It got worse. "They never liked anyone I dated," Ethan admitted one night after I pushed him to open up. "They think if I get too close to someone, I'll stop taking care of them." Suddenly, everything made sense. The cold treatment, the hostility, it wasn't about me. It was about control. They didn't want Ethan to have a life outside of them, and I was a threat to that. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. my voice barely above a whisper. Because I didn't want you to feel guilty, he said softly. I knew they'd never accept you, but I didn't want that to affect us. My heart broke for him. All those years he carried that weight alone, but not anymore. After Ethan told me the truth about his family, everything started falling into place. I felt this mix of anger and sadness. Anger because they had manipulated and used him for years, and sadness because Ethan had carried that burden alone. He didn't deserve any of this. Ethan, I said softly, sitting next to him on the couch, you don't have to keep doing this. You've done enough. He looked tired, like years of stress had finally caught up with him. I know, he murmured. I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the one who turned my back on my family. But they've turned their backs on you, I said gently, taking his hand. You've been carrying them for years while they've treated you like an ATM. It's not fair. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm done, he whispered, almost like he was trying to convince himself. But I saw the resolve in his eyes. This time, he meant it. Drawing the line a few days after that conversation, Ethan called his mom. I sat beside him, holding his hand while he told her calmly but firmly that he was cutting them off. No more money, no more support, nothing. I could hear Margaret's voice through the phone, even though it wasn't on speaker. She was screaming. The moment Ethan said the words, I can't keep doing this, she lost it. You can't do this to us, Ethan, she shrieked. Your family. I've been doing this for too long, Mom, Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with sadness. You and the others need to start taking care of yourselves. I can't keep sacrificing my life for people who don't even respect me or my wife. That's when she said it. She's manipulating you, Ethan. Rachel's poisoning your mind against your own family. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into my palm, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't my fight. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened. No, Mom, he said, his tone icy. Rachel's been the only one who's been good to me. You and the others? You've done nothing but take advantage of me. I saw his eyes well up with tears, but he refused to let them fall. I'm done, he repeated. Unless things change, I don't want to hear from any of you. Then he hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel Ethan's pain, and it broke my heart. He sat there, staring at the phone like it had just sucked the life out of him. I pulled him into my arms, and for the first time in a long time, he let it all out. The aftermath begins. Of course, Margaret didn't take it well. Within hours, Ethan's phone was flooded with missed calls and texts from his mom, his sisters, and Jake, all of them demanding explanations, hurling insults, and accusing me of turning him against them. I'm blocking them, Ethan muttered, scrolling through the messages. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes were hard. They don't get to guilt trip me anymore. And that's exactly what he did. One by one, he blocked them. But Margaret? Oh, she wasn't done. The next day, I checked my phone after ignoring it for a while, and I had a bunch of missed calls and texts from her too. The messages were disgusting. She called me everything under the sun: gold digger, manipulative witch, homewrecker. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to stoop to her level, but I took screenshots of everything. I had a feeling we might need them later. I didn't tell Ethan right away because I didn't want to stress him out more. But that didn't stop Margaret. The showdown at our doorstep a week later, she showed up, with Claire, Chloe, and Jake in tow. It was a Sunday morning. Ethan and I were having coffee on the porch, enjoying the quiet for once, when we heard a car pull up. I knew immediately who it was. Stay here, Ethan said, standing up. His face was like stone. Not a chance, I muttered, getting up with him. I wasn't going to let him face them alone. Margaret stormed up the driveway, with her army of entitled brats right behind her. We need to talk, she announced, her tone all business, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. No, we don't, Ethan replied, crossing his arms. I made myself clear. Ethan, you can't just cut us off, Claire whined. We're family. You mean the family that treats me like a wallet? Ethan shot back. That family? We didn't mean. Stop. Ethan held up his hand, and to my surprise, they actually shut up. You've had plenty of chances to treat Rachel and me with respect. You chose not to. Now you're dealing with the consequences. Margaret wasn't having it. This isn't about respect, Ethan, she hissed. This is about loyalty. Blood. We're your family. You don't just walk away. Ethan's jaw clenched. Family isn't about blood, Mom. It's about who's there for you. And guess what? Rachel's been there for me. You haven't. That's when Jake decided to open his mouth. You're pathetic, he sneered, letting her control you like this. What happened to the guy who used to put his family first? That guy, Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm, got tired of being used. That guy woke up and realized his family doesn't give a damn about him. I could see Ethan's hands shaking, and I knew he was close to losing it. That's when I stepped in. Okay, that's enough, I said, stepping forward. My voice was steady, but I was done being polite. You've said what you came to say. Now leave, or I'll call the cops. Margaret looked like she wanted to explode. You don't get to, actually. I do. I cut her off, my tone sharper now. This is our home, and you're not welcome here. There was a tense silence. For a second, I thought Margaret might push it further, but then Ethan spoke one last time. If you ever show up here again, he said quietly, I'll get a restraining order. That did it. Margaret's face went pale. Without another word, she turned and marched back to the car, her little entourage trailing behind her. The legal mess. We thought that would be the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. A few weeks later, we got a legal notice. Margaret was claiming that Ethan had stolen money from the family to fund his business and was demanding that he pay back an outrageous amount. It was laughable. Ethan had never taken a dime from them. He built his company with his own blood, sweat, and tears. But Margaret wasn't above lying to get what she wanted. Thankfully, Ethan had kept detailed records of everything over the years, proof that every cent he invested came from his own hard work. Our lawyer tore their claims apart in less than 2 weeks. When the judge dismissed the case and ordered them to pay our legal fees, I thought Margaret's head was going to explode. Sweet justice after the court fiasco. Margaret and her crew were shunned by most of the extended family. Word spread quickly, and people weren't exactly eager to associate with someone who tried to scam her own son. As for us, life finally settled down. Ethan was lighter, happier. Without the constant pressure of his family's demands, he was finally free to focus on himself and on us. We started traveling more, spending more time with friends, and just living. I should have done this years ago, he admitted one night as we sat on the beach, watching the sunset. Better late than never, I murmured, leaning my head on his shoulder. And honestly, I've never felt more at peace. We're finally free from the toxicity, the manipulation, and the endless guilt. Margaret and her kids can live with the consequences of their actions. And Ethan, he's finally living for himself, and I'm going to make sure it stays that way, forever.